Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion, the podcast about books, authors, their craft and more. My name is Edith, and joining me from across the pond is physician and fiction author Ronald Dwinnells. Hello Ronald and welcome to Book Lovers Companion.
Hi, Edith. You can call me Ron. That's a little bit easier.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. And like I said before we started the recording, you've been very accommodating because we had to change dates and so on. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
And we are here to talk about your book with the title 30 Days Have September, which came out this year, 2024. And it is a book that takes place in two different countries, for one, and two different timelines. And I think you are the best person to tell our listeners a little bit about your book without giving too much away, of course.
Okay. Well, the book is a fictional book. It's a little bit of a historical romance, but it's based on a basically true events that's happened to me in my lifetime. I'm a physician by education and training, and when I was in medical school, one semester I was on the floor, on the clinical floor, and admitted a patient from Eastern Kentucky. I went to medical school at University of Kentucky, and anyway, she came in. She was an elderly lady, and she had a spot on her belly, and we had to figure out what that spot was. Well, the spot ended up being a pancreatic cancer, and it was on the first day of September of that year that I admitted her and worked her, and we became kind of like friends. And over those 30 days, and this is the very true part, over 30 days in September of 1982, I saw her deteriorate because it was terminal, and she died on the 30th day of September. So hence the book 30 Days Has September. But what was so profound for me during that time period was, up to that point, I had learned a lot about medicine, the science of medicine, how to treat people, how to fix them, and so forth. But I didn't really learn a whole lot about how do you deal with people? How do you deal with patients? The so-called bedside manners and so forth. And that was a valuable lesson that she taught me. She taught me about the humanity of medicine, the compassion, and so forth, which, I don't know if you can really teach it unless you experience it. So that's what I got out of it. And that stuck with me for many years after I finished medical school. And I realized how important that was for me, for my eventual success in the field of medicine and so forth. So it became a book. I fictionalized the story. I made the story to start out with a very irascible medical student. He was just mean, and he was mad, and he was just angry at the world. He didn't want to be a medical student, but his parents pushed him to do that. So that's why he was angry. Plus, there were some other things involved in his life. The patient in the book sees the good in him. However, she sees through that rough character, and she eventually helps him find himself, if you will, and through the 30 days that she had to live, and that's what the story's about. And then there's a love story mixed into that, not with a medical student and the patient, but the patient relates a past lover to this medical student, and so there's a plot that's created through that. So that's that's an overall really superficial overview of the book. But yeah, so
Mm, mm. Fascinating. And also the timelines, like I said before, two timelines, the past, the patient's past and her present. Was that something you also found out about your patient, about her past? Or did that come the idea for this character in your book from somewhere else?
yeah, no, that idea. So the two timelines is present in 1982 because that's where
Mm.
the setting is. But the past is in the 40s. The 40s have always been intriguing to me. That that time period, just because the world was. I didn't live in the 40s, but from all the readings that I've done, it was a time of uncertainties and so forth, and uh, a time period where people didn't make monumental life decisions like getting married or going to war and dying and those kinds of things. So anyway, it's an intriguing period for me, and I feel that it's a very romantic period as well. You didn't know if you were going to live the next 10 years because of the
Yeah.
wars and so forth. So it always intrigued me, and I like that setting. And I've done lots of reading during that settings or of that setting. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of nice to create a scenario of the past like that, and then tie it into the present?
Oh.
So that's why there's two time, and the story fit in really well. And there is a partial truth or partial nonfiction part of it, where in real life this lady did have a boyfriend back in the 40s that she had relayed to me. So that's probably was part of the impetus of writing about that.
Mm. And like you said, meeting this person, meeting this patient of yours, and hearing about her story as well. And but what was the last straw, so to speak, that made you write this book at all? And make it a fictionalized version of what happened or what you found out, and this meeting of this special patient in your life.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, actually, I started writing the book about 30 years ago. Um, it's, yeah, not too many years after, I finished medical school because it always was with me, and then I would write off and on. As a physician, I have to use my left side of my brain, a lot, and, during those periods, it was hard to write creatively. So I would shelf it for a little bit, and then when I had some time, I would bring it back, and I just realized how much I loved writing the story, and the fictional writing was just. I've never done fictional writing before. I've wrote another book, which is a nonfiction on leadership in the past, and I've written a lot of medical research papers, and I've written a lot of grant proposals. So those tend to be more technical. But this was so creative that I write anything I wanted. I could say anything I wanted to. I could create scenes. I could create plots, subplots, and all that. And that was really, really fun for me. Um, so, so anyway, so I did start writing this book many years ago, and then probably in the last 2 3 years, I've been slowing down in my work, and I had a little bit of time to be more creative, and I just started writing again, and then finishing the book. So that's how that was. So it was a very very long process, but I
Mm.
realized I just really enjoyed it. Hmm.
Mm. It's interesting what you say, coming from a field of science where you have to follow certain rules when you write, of course, and then discovering this freedom when you write fiction. But still, what did you find challenging when you wrote fiction compared, for example, to writing for a scientific topic?
I didn't find it challenging at all. I found it freeing, very freeing. It was a freeing experience where I could be myself and so forth. The and even there really wasn't a whole lot of challenge. The creative process just came to me. I realized I needed to, like, I would know when to insert certain scenes, certain dialogues, and so forth. It just came to me. The challenge is, if in writing, is to me the more structured things, like research writing, um, and part the reason I say that is because you're kind of confined. You have a certain outline that you have to follow, and I don't really like that. I think it's just my personality. I like to be free and write whatever and however and so forth. So but when you say challenges, I don't think I had any really challenges of it. Um, the creative process to me was fun and freeing, as I say. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
I don't know if that makes any sense, Edith, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. It does in a way. And you said also, again, coming from the field of science and research is intriguing. Otherwise, you
Mhm.
wouldn't be a scientist. But also for people who write fiction. And like you said, these two timelines um, were also reason for you to do research. And you said you were intrigued by the 40s, life in the 40s. And
Mhm.
did you
Mhm.
that's a challenge for some authors. I mention it because they often mention it. They are afraid, or it can happen to them, that they fall into the rabbit hole of research for their books. Did that
Mhm.
happen to you, or were you aware it might happen? And so you said, oh, now I know I have to be careful?
No,
No?
no, it never occurred to me. Oh, no.
Okay.
Just now when you're telling me about it, I'm thinking, no, that didn't happen to me. I never even thought about it. Um, I will think about it now, but I don't think it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, lucky you.
Yeah.
But also the
Yeah.
80s. I mean, you lived through the 80s, of course, and that's what you experienced. But and you started
Mhm.
writing your book. You said at the time, or because you met this person, and it all
Mhm.
began even before the book came out, long before uh,
Yes.
2024. Um, did you? I mean, might sound a bit strange, this question, but I think it has merit because sometimes we do remember incorrectly. Did you have to research if you remembered correctly? If you remembered the 80s correctly?
Mhm. It Did I have to research what the
Yeah.
parts of my book
Yes.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
That takes place in the 80s because sometimes we are so convinced. Of course,
Yeah.
things existed at the time. Then we realize, oh no, they existed even later, but we were
Mm,
so convinced. We remember them having them or doing things like that even back then.
mhm. No, I didn't have to research anything in from the '80s. The setting is in the state of Kentucky, and there were a couple of little towns and so forth that I couldn't remember, and I had to look those up.
Mhm.
My the most research I did with this particular book was, there is a airplane B-17, U.S. bomber,
Mhm.
scene in the opening of the book.
Yeah.
And I had been in those planes a few times at air shows and so forth, and I was very familiar with the interior. But there were a couple of details that I wasn't. So I researched those kinds of things. but I was, but in specifically in terms of the 80s, no, it for me, the 80s was 40 years ago. So it was a long time. But, sometimes in those long-term memory things, you can remember it like it was yesterday,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So no, I have to do any research. I don't think I can't remember um, anything because again, since it was a fictional writing, a lot of the dialogue, of course, I could create,
Mm, mm,
recreate and amplify and change and so forth. But yeah, but no, I didn't. Um,
mm,
Now with the scientific writing, I have to obviously do a lot of research, but
mm, yeah. And your character, Jack, the physician,
mhm.
the young medical student, um, would you say that in his case, it was, I mean, I would say it was very fortunate that he met Mildred at the time he did. Like you said, he wasn't that keen on being a medical student. He was more or less forced to be one. Um, what do you think? Or do you think that she more or less is responsible for his attitude change, the way he sees things
Yes.
in the end?
Yes. Yes, that was the premise of most of the story is, so Jack had some incidents that occurred to him, early in his life,
Mm,
and he developed a negative attitude about things, and then he came from a wealthy family, and they had it in their minds that they wanted him to be a doctor primarily because they could kinda show him off. "Oh, I have a son who's a doctor," so that was but Jack didn't really feel it, and again, he was a smart guy. He could do the schoolwork, but he couldn't, he just didn't like people. He didn't like patients even. So, but Mildred obviously saw something in him, so in the book, and so she knew she was going to die, and she wanted to do something very, um, uh, profound before she died, and she in her mind, she wanted to help this person become the best doctor he could be. So she creates a little bit of a scenario. She kind of tells him a story which wasn't exactly true, but she tells him a story, and he kind of becomes obsessed with the story, and she wanted to see her true love one more time before she died, and that was the story that she gave him, but she doesn't know where he is, and basically, he gets obsessed with it, and he wants to find this man for
mm,
her
yeah.
before she dies, and that's what the story's about, so she kinda sends him on a wild goose chase, if you will, and he roams around Kentucky to try to find this man. And, yeah, and I can't give away the ending.
Yeah, yeah. No, 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 of course we won't. We won't. People should read your book. And it's her way of teaching him bedside manners, like you said at the beginning. Isn't that also the hard part for most doctors, for most physicians? L- Because that's, like you said, it's not something you learn at medical school. Having a sort of empathy for your patients is, I suppose, good on the one hand, but might also be hard for people if there is too much empathy, because you have to find a way, mm, to put a distance also, don't you, between yourself and the patient and their suffering. Otherwise, how could you do your job as a physician?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah, you can't obviously teach that. The concept is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't possess emotional intelligence. They can't, for some reason, they don't have that compassion or the empathy for others. And it seems like that seems to be more true in the highly scientific field of people. They're so engrossed with their science, and their brains are so high up there that they lack this emotional intelligence. I mean, that's a generalization, of course, uh, but again, in the book, yes, that is true. She brings that out, and in the book also, he has a best friend, um, named his name is Augrey, and Augrey is a very wise man. He was a former mountain climber, a mountain guide. He grew up in hardship. He was an orphan, and he wasn't as well. He didn't have wealth like Jack did,
Mm,
but this taught him to be wise in the world, and understanding and so forth. So they become best friends.
mhm.
Two polar opposite people become friends, and this Augrey was very important in Jack's life, and in his development of becoming this empathetic, compassionate doctor.
To find out about his own humanity, just like Mildred, because, like you said, people in a scientific field often live from the neck upwards, which is
Yes,
understandable.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the hard part of medicine for a lot of people. Most people who are in the medical field, who are physicians, they had to be fairly good in sciences and so forth to even get accepted to
Yeah.
medical school. And they tended to be the better students and so forth. But I think sometimes some of these people was so engrossed in the science or so engrossed in studying that they lose, or did they just
Mm.
never develop that part of their character, which is to develop the emotional aspect of things and so forth. So but it is a problem. I've lived it. I've have many doctor friends who are like that still. you know, uh, yeah, and but that was part of the thing I was trying to bring out in this
Mm.
book is can can people change, and can people change for the best? So something monumental, something very deep had to happen to Jack
Mm.
for him to change, and Mildred knew that, and that's why she kind of set him up, if you will, set him up to experience maybe some adversities and so forth, so that he would learn.
Do you
Simple
think?
story, really.
Yeah, yeah, but a profound story. Um, do you think that as a physician, as someone who works as, let's say, as a surgeon, who maybe doesn't
Hmm.
need that much of a bedside manner because he never meets, or he often doesn't meet his or her patients when they are conscious. Um, do you think, maybe not, that people like that have a special kind of personality, or or that people with a special kind of personality choose these jobs other than, let's say, a GP?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything scientific that says that, but observation,
Mm.
you're absolutely right. In our field, we always say, "Oh, the surgeons are the meanest kind of doctors," because yeah, they don't have to be nice, right? Like you said, their patients are usually under anesthesia, and they don't have to talk to them or anything like that. I'm a pediatrician. Pediatricians are the nicest, by the way, because they deal with little kids and mothers and so forth. And yeah, so we tend to have more fun personalities and yeah, and again, generalizations. I'll tell you who the worst is the pathologists, because they never have to talk to people. They're the ones that do the autopsies and
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes. Yeah, but on the other
yeah.
hand, their
So they don't.
patients never sue them.
Yeah, right. No, they don't.
Ah,
So
well,
yeah, but definitely the ingrained personalities of people lead them to certain specialties, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? I mean, that's not something mentioned in the book because of the time it is set, but since you already mentioned bedside manners and science science versus bedside manners and being a personality stuck in your head or someone who has empathy, what about the challenge of using robots, AI in medicine? Because, for example, when we think of countries like Japan, they
Mhm.
use robots
Mm.
in the hospitals because of their demographics. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So robotics, they do use a lot of robotics in surgical
Mm,
procedures. And what I've seen is they are very, very good because they're
mm,
they're super accurate.
mhm,
Everything is computerized and so forth. So, and obviously nobody talks to the machines and vice versa. So, but AI, I'm for me, and I'm from the old school, if you will. I've been a doctor for 40 years, so um, I'm still back in that time period in terms of how I look at medicine and understand it. But AI, my concern about things like AI is, um, do will your knowledge eventually dissipate because you're totally reliant on a machine to give you that answer? You just look it up on the computer, instead of really searching it and understanding it. And that's my biggest concern. It's kind of like when the calculators first came out. Um, we were all forced to, not forced, but we all learned basic math and so forth. After the calculators came out, these kids didn't really have to learn how to get to the answers because they could just plug it into to the machines, to the calculators. And there's a lot of kids, or a lot of people that are really bad in math these days, and I attribute a lot of that to automation types of things. But so my concern with AI is, well, is are eventually are we going to be so dependent on the computer to give us the answers that we're not going to really bother to learn exactly why it happens and what happens? Is that the worst thing? I don't know. It might not be, but I do know that an extremely important part of being a doctor is the physician's relationship with the patient,
yeah.
because a lot of it is not straightforward. It's not black and white. A lot of it is intuitive. um
Mm,
you know uh like when I got to know my patients, um I would know if that child was indeed something really bad going on, or it was just a plain old little cold. You just kind of
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
That's that intuitive aspect of medicine. Whereas if you're dependent on AI, you would just strictly go by, the tangible, objective information.
Mm,
So that still vague notion, that the intuitive part, I think, to me, is very important as a doctor.
mm,
So I'm not, and again, I may not understand all of AI fully. I don't really want to, because I don't agree with it, but
yeah.
yeah. But there, but how do you stop that? And I think that is the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
It's kind of like insurance companies these days. They like population health, And I get it. I understand it from
Mm.
an economic and financial, practical aspect,
Yeah. Yeah.
of doing business,
Yeah.
medicine business. But everybody's very individual. The blood pressure of 120/80 may not be good for every single person, but that's what the insurance companies want, you know. And then if you can get people to that level, then a lot of these insurance companies gives you a bonus. Like they call it value-based incentives. So you meet the criteria, your
Yeah.
patients are all 120/80, and therefore we're going to give you a monetary reward for keeping your patients healthy. But
Mm.
is 120/80 good for every single person? It might not be, you know. So that's just a very basic example.
Mm. Yeah,
Mhm.
understandable. And again, AI does not only play a very large part in science, but also in writing. I mean, now you have published your book. It was a long, so it was a long journey for you. And were you ever, or are you ever worried that also in this field of the creative sciences or in the creative arts that AI, you know, is there to just a substitute for the human experience? Because the human experience also in writing, like you said, this you know when something is not right. You have the experience as a doctor, you know when something is not right. But isn't it,
Mhm.
can that not also be said for writing? As a reader, you might know, you know, that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like a human being has written this book or this story.
Right. I think so. I've read some things that AI generated, and I don't know. For me, I can tell. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
mechanistic,
Mm.
versus really deeply creative. But I've also read some AI generated work that's really good. It's like unbelievable that a machine can write this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So am I worried? Well, no. No, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't. For me, this isn't how I earn a living. It's more of a hobby, I guess. And it's a inner outlet for creativity. So that's what I get a lot out of this is the ability to do something creative and then have it published and other people read it and they might like it and they might not. But for me, it's really something that other people would read something that I wrote, and there are people that say they like it. So
Yep.
to me, that's really so. It's more of a self thing, I guess. Hmm.
But an important part, and I wouldn't call it a hobby, to be honest. I mean, it's a child of labor. I mean, for all the authors out there, that's what they love to do, and so did you. And it's important to you, of course. How would you describe for other authors out there your writing process? I mean, like you said, you started it a long time ago, but when you sat down and said, "So I'm going to finish this book now because it's important to me and it might also be important
Hmm.
to people out there," which it is, how would you describe your writing process?
Hmm.
How did it work for you?
Yeah, for me, I look at it as I need to know how the story ends,
Mm.
and if I know the ending, then I know what the story's where the story's going to go. So in this particular book, I actually wrote the ending last. I mean, first.
Mhm.
That was my. So I wrote the ending of, and then I wrote the first part. Then I filled in the middle, and I've been working on several other book projects, and that's how I've done all of them. I know if I know the ending, then I know the story. Is the way I look at it. Um, and then so to me, if I know where I'm going, it's kind of like the light. If I see the light there, then I know how to get there. Uh, so that's the way I look at it. And it's worked very well for
Okay.
me. It
Interesting.
it just spurns creativity for me. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Mhm.
Um, but are you then also a planner? Meticulous planner? A little bit of a planner? More like in between a pantser or?
Mhm. No, not for me. With the scientific writing, the nonfiction book that I wrote, I planned it in my head. I don't write outlines. I have it in my head, but but that one is fairly structured, and all the research papers are structured. So those obviously had to be planned, but this one, that's why I liked it so much is I didn't have to plan. It just came. Yeah. So yeah, there was a vague outline in my head because again, I knew what the ending was, and I wanted how do I get to the ending, and I knew the beginning. So how do I get there? So in fact, there were parts where I created characters as I'm writing to make it fit, um,
Yeah.
make the process fit, and I try to tell the story obviously from the beginning to the end, because I know where the end is. So
Oh, and
yeah,
did the characters talk to you?
yes, oh for sure, yeah. I so whenever I like doing labor work, so I like working outside, and those are the best times for me because I can think,
Yeah.
and then I would play dialogues in my head. Yeah, many times. Yeah, the dialogues just came, and sometimes as I'm writing, the dialogues come. But I would plan dialogue, not plan, but I would think about dialogues and where it would lead to. But yes,
Just dialogues, or do you also imagine scenes in your head?
yes, yes, I imagine scenes a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a chapter in the book about um, this Augury is climbing Mount Kilimanjaro because
Mhm.
that's what he did. And I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. That's one of my hobbies too, is climbing big mountains.
Mhm.
And so so yes, that was totally. I could see every bit of it. There's a horse farm party. I could see that. Yeah, so there's a lot of visual in my mind about things. I need to know what the scene looks like before I
Yeah.
write it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do you also need to see the character? If
yes,
you know, yeah. Mhm.
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and um, I do bring out the character details in the book. So so Jack was kind of a frumpy kind of guy at the beginning, and he had long hair, shaggy hair, and so yes, I do see those. Yeah, because again, if I visualize it, then I can write it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely get that. And looking back on writing this book, which character would you
Mhm.
say was the most enjoyable for you to write?
Augury. I liked Augury a lot, because Augury was a really different kind of guy, and he lived through hardships. A lot of it is what was my life. I lived through many hardships as a child,
Mm.
and I wanted this person, but I learned a lot from the adversities,
Mhm.
and that's how I wanted to depict Augury. But because he had such a hard life, he learned a lot, and he was able to help his friend Jack
Mm.
see the world in a little different light. So yeah, Augury was very fun to write for me. And when I did travel to Africa, I loved the country. I loved the people there. It was just
Mhm.
an amazing place.
Mm.
But yeah, so I think I liked Augury the best. Yeah, Jack was a combination of a lot of my medical student colleagues
Mm.
from way back many years ago. They were a lot of they weren't mean, they were just kind of arrogant. They thought,
Mm.
well, because they were medical students, they were better than anybody else, and they had that attitude, and
Mhm.
that never settled well with me.
Mm.
But yeah, but I liked Augury.
Yeah, understandable. Do you think that I mean, I suppose you agree when I say that the hardships in his life helped him, of course, become the person he was, and it also helped him shape his personality and become this empathetic character, unlike Jack?
Yes, yes. And that's my experience. My personal experience in life is I had a lot of hardships. I
Mm.
was born in Japan. I After World War II, my mom was an unwed mother.
Mm.
My dad was an American soldier, and I had
Mm.
a really hard time there. Other kids didn't like me because I was half.
Mm.
In Japan, the culture is it's very homogeneous.
Yeah.
And if you look different, it wasn't good. So, and they even my mom's family even disowned her because,
Mm.
she had a relationship with an American man. The
Mm.
Americans were the enemies, and that kind of stuff. And but I didn't like it when I was growing up, but many years later, like now, I'm thankful that I did have some of that hardship because I learned to become a
Yeah.
really different person.
Yeah.
And I think I became a better person because of it. So so to me, and I think that was one of the things I kind of vaguely tried to touch on in this book was, it's good to have hardships.
Mm.
You learn from it,
Mm.
and I think you become a better person because of the difficulties in
Mm.
life.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah,
Well, one might think that Jack would have been able to develop more of his empathy, being okay. He was
mhm,
born with a golden spoon in his mouth, but still,
yeah,
he was more or less pressured into doing what he had to do. He couldn't choose his path, and yet,
yeah,
it turned out that he became, like you said, maybe arrogant, maybe angry, not seeing other people's hardships.
yes, yeah. So and in life and in my profession, I saw that. I saw a lot of mental slash psychological issues with especially the teenage kids and so
Mm.
forth. And
Mm.
yeah, there were generally two different reactions to adversities with these kids. On one side, these kids would just clam up and they just became totally isolated from the world. They didn't like the
Mm.
world. They had bad moods. They were just, they got into trouble and so forth. Then another group, I would see that used it for something good.
Mm.
And they might have been in trouble a lot and so forth. They were in fights a lot, but then they got into playing football or some kind of sports, and they were really good at it because they went through a lot of adversities and they knew how to fight and they knew how to, you know, do things like that. Um, so yeah, but I've seen, and in the book, I chose for Jack to kind of become this unhappy person because of some of the things that happened to him. And he didn't have a very good relationship with his mother. And
Mm.
that's kind of showed the book and so forth.
Mm.
But again, he's a smart guy, and he, there was deep inside there was passion and compassion with through him. And that's what this Mildred saw in
Mm.
him.
Mm.
And that's why she helped him. Yeah.
All it needed was someone to bring it out in him. It was there.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
Yeah. 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 There's a medical term. Well, it's not strictly medical, but it's called resiliency.
mm,
So there are kids. There's a whole new, relatively new science in medicine called ACEs, ACES. It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences,
mm,
and ACE, and these are the kids that grow up in very dysfunctional families, one parent family, violence in the family, very dysfunctional, and so forth. Well, these are the kids that end up growing up um, in not a very good way, and they become our future um, depressed people, our future addicts, our future
mm,
suicide victims. These people don't do really well. Well, but some do. And the reason they do is they've developed resiliency. And usually the resiliency comes in the form of somebody taking these kids under their wing. So a grandmother is on the side. She sees a good in this child, and she kind of brings her under her wing, and then they grow up
mm,
very
mm,
normally with the help of somebody else. So, and that's kind of like this book.
mhm,
Jack need some form. How could he create resiliency? Well, with the help of somebody else, with the help of
mhm.
Mildred. So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but it's a very
Yeah, yeah.
fascinating
No, no.
and very realistic thing that happens. Yes. Hmm.
No, it does make sense to me because I'm a teacher, and sometimes we often wonder
Okay.
about the children we teach, and sometimes you especially when you know the parents, you think, how is it even possible when you know the parents that you have such kids? I mean, that in a positive way, you know? So there has to be, like you
Yeah.
say, some kind of resilience. There has to be someone in
Mhm.
the background for these
Mhm.
children to turn
Yeah.
out the way they do in a positive way. Others, not so much.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen this many, many times with the patients that I took care of over the years.
Yeah.
Um, there's a next door neighbor that just takes that person under
Yeah.
their responsibility type
Yeah.
of thing. And so yeah, and these kids do, some of them really do become um successful
Mm,
because of that. But yeah. And that's kind of, again, what this book is a little bit about, is
yeah.
Mildred provided that for Jack.
Mm, yeah. Positive outlook. It is possible for him to become the kind of doctor he maybe is meant to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ron, may I ask you for your advice for other authors or who wants to write their book and publish it? What would be your advice for them?
um well, to me, this is to me, writing a book is a especially fictional books are is an art form. I thoroughly believe it's an art form, having written both nonfiction and fiction. The nonfiction is, I guess, as I say, it's mechanistic. It
Mm,
follows a certain formula and so forth. But fictional writing is all the insides of you, your art, and so forth. So um, I, I would say the most difficult part of any kind of anything that we do is to start it. So my advice is, hey, if you think you really want to write a book about something, then just start it. Don't think about it, just start it. And um, There was a good quote I read the other day, and it's not going to be verbatim because I can't remember exactly, but the quote was about um, doubt doubt has killed more dreams than failures ever will.
Oh.
Something to that effect. So
Mhm.
a lot of people doubt it's in their minds and they never start because they're thinking, I can't write this. This is way beyond me. I can't
Yeah.
do it. Okay, so they never even start. So they failed already. But don't doubt yourself. I think if you really think you got a good idea and you're a decent writer, I think you can so to me, that's the first advice is just start it. And then visualize. Like you said, I do visualize a lot. And if you can visualize a story to me, then you can write it.
Oh.
Um,
Oh.
but and then again, I think we all have our own unique ways of how we go about it. And again, I said that I like to start at the ending, because to me um, that's the light at the end of the tunnel where I can see where I'm going.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Oh.
But yeah,
Okay.
I think the biggest advice is don't doubt yourself. Just start it. Just do it.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
and then go
Good.
from there.
Yeah. Absolutely good advice. I agree. Give it a try. See where it leads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. But that's true
Uh,
in anything.
yeah. True. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mhm.
What about your plans? What can we expect
Mhm.
from you, fiction-wise, in the near future?
Well, I'm almost finished with my next fictional novel. Uh, um, it's called Climbing Jacob's Ladder. And that is a book about a child that I took care of for many years, who had severe disabilities. And uh, there's so many times that we as people will look at um, other people with severe disabilities or even older people, and we don't think they're there, and we
Mm.
we talk about that person or whatever, and we say anything in front of these people because we don't think they can understand or hear or anything.
Mm.
Well, I wanted to bring out in this book the concept that, well, maybe they can hear. Maybe they can't understand exactly like we do, but maybe they can feel it. It's kind of like animals, right? So if you have a dog or cat or whatever, the dog knows when you're in a bad mood or when you're mad or angry because the dog kind of cowers but they know when you're happy too because their tail wags and all that. Well, how do they know that? It's intuitive. So
Yeah.
so so I don't in the book, I'm bringing out the suggestion that disabled people can understand what's going on in their environment. Um, and the other concept I bring out is, um, just because they're severely disabled, does that mean they have absolutely no influence in anything or anyone? No. To me, I wanted to show that they do have influence. For instance, this little child had an influence on me as a doctor. I think I became a better doctor because this person existed. So the Jacob's ladder is a metaphor for he's going to heaven. He died. He was terminal,
Mhm.
um, but metaphor is each rung of the ladder represents somebody that he influenced, and as he influenced them, he was climbing up the ladder to heaven. So that's the metaphor that I give the book. Um, so uh, so that's the next book, and it's almost done. I'm pleased with it. It's coming out really good. It's the little boy narrates the book actually. So he narrates, "Hi, my name is Jacob, blah blah blah," and he talks through the book, and then he
Mhm.
comments on the events that happens
Mhm.
in the book.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So And then, he had a significant influence on his mother. And in real life, when I first met the family, the mother and the child, the mother was a very quiet, non-assertive person. As she went through the adversities with him, because there was a lot, he was tough to deal with and tough to take care of. She became stronger, and I saw that. I saw her evolve and develop into somebody that um, that that um, stood for something, and that became quite assertive in life. And she ended up becoming a teacher. Um, she had she went back to school because of him. She wanted to teach children who had disabilities and so forth. And so that's kind of the book. It's a metaphor on life. It's about it's a suggestion that yes, everybody is valuable to humanity, and everybody has some influence on others. That they're not a waste just because they have severe disabilities. So that's the concept of the book.
Oh, fascinating. Absolutely
Yeah,
fascinating. And
yeah,
made me think about experiences I had with children, school children, and so on, and how they see others and how they accept them
yeah.
just the way they are, and are far more open than we are as adults. And sometimes I wonder, what is it we do to them that they turn out like us? Being unaccepting and
Mhm.
being judgmental, and yeah.
Mm. It's structure. That's what it is.
Mm,
Because I
mm,
write in my nonfiction. The nonfiction book is a leadership book, and
mhm.
there's a chapter in there about when we were kids, when we were born and we're kids. We can do all kinds of things, right? We imagine play, we do all
Yeah.
these great things. There's very little structure. When we go to school, there's rules. So we have to follow the rules and so forth. And then when we get a job, we have to follow more rules. And then, when we're out in life, we follow rules, the laws, and those kinds of things. So after a while, do we diminish that fun and creativity in people? I mean, obviously rules are necessary in things, but does that hamper some people's evolvement and development of creativity? I don't know. But yes, in this book, I do write about he was mainstreamed, and that was true. He was mainstreamed into regular classroom,
Mm,
but all the other kids liked him, and
mhm.
they were all his friends. You know, they doted on him and so forth. But the teachers found it kind of like it was a pain because it was difficult to teach somebody like him, or
Yeah.
having somebody like him in a classroom. So there is a little bit
Yeah.
of that in there as a sub of
Mm.
things. Hmm.
Again,
Yeah.
fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Um, Ron, is there?
Yeah, it was fun to write.
Yeah, it sounds like a fascinating read. Is there anything
Mhm.
else you would like our listeners to know?
About the book or just in general?
In general, about the book,
Um,
whichever.
yeah, yeah. The book, again, it's based on a true event. I just fictionalized it. I think it's a fun read. It's a simple read. I don't. I've always been a plain spoken guy. I don't speak in high scientific terms or anything like that. So I think it's the easy read, and to me, it was a good story. I
Oh,
really liked the ending. Yeah. So no. I, Other than that, a lot of it is based on life experiences, and a lot of it is imaginative, of
yeah.
course. But no, no, other than that, we covered a lot, and I loved this interview. It was fun to talk with you.
Same
Mhm.
here. Just my message. Go out and buy this book. Mm, and read
Thank you.
it. You will enjoy it. Ron, thank you so much for joining me. Please wait for me in the green room. Don't go away. I'll be with you shortly.
I will. Okay, thanks.
Dear listeners, I do hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as my guest and I did. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I do hope you will tune in for another episode of Book Lovers Companion. Until next time.